It's Trading Tip Tuesday. Let's talk about seasonality. Bit of a mini lesson on stuff that we look at in crypto specifically. So when I think of seasonality, I think of a farmer's almanac, essentially. What's happened in the previous years? What is there to expect in the coming year? Certainly not a crystal ball, but useful when setting expectations, really. That's ultimately what I'm doing. I used to work in a restaurant and they would journal out every day what happened during the day. The manager at night would do this, and they could see what went wrong during the day, what went right in previous years, and adjust accordingly and next time it happened. The most recent crypto relevant date was obviously March 11th, 12th, when we basically almost went to zero last year. Much different than it was this year. More of an aberration than a seasonal thing, hopefully. But typically when people are talking about seasonality, they're talking about cyclical effects within one calendar year. Although this can be, I've heard people talk about seasonality on hourly or the minute seasonality, or any sort of repeating pattern that recurs based on a time component, I think is what people in maybe finance consider seasonality. The reason it's important in crypto also for US people is because of long-term and short-term capital gains taxes, which can and do play a role in quarterly seasonality. So let's say you're trying to avoid short-term capital gains by holding a position for longer than a year, then that will keep you in, let's say Bitcoin, for example, and keep you out of alts until that time point passes. Depending on how people do this, this may occur at the beginning of the year. This may occur Q1. It may occur Q2. It may coincide with taxes for US citizens in Q1. I'll look at the numbers in a second, but the Q1 and Q3 seasonalities are typically the worst for everything, and Q2 is typically the best for alts. If we look at the quarterly price changes for BTC, you can separate this by month, but I prefer to zoom out a little bit more and look at the quarters. And to me, it becomes pretty clear, especially when you throw out anything pre-2013, because, we were at $0 or less at that point, less than $100, whatever it was. Super volatile, sort of unpredictable, not necessarily unrepeatable, but unlikely to recur frequently again. So we throw out 2013 and we get this quarterly breakdown here. Q2, Q4 is super bullish relative to Q1 and Q3. Why is that is another question that I was alluding to. Maybe it's taxes, maybe it's other external seasonalities with legacy markets in some way. I don't think I've ever seen like a great explanation as to why, but Q2, Q4 are definitely where my expectations are just default bullish. Q1 historically hasn't been as bullish, right? And we can see that post 2013, it's basically a 0% gain, even including 2021, which is an incredible Q1 and may just bust the seasonality entirely. Maybe it is, this super cycle, new paradigm. All these people are talking about, right? Anytime I give target of 100K BTC, people in the comments are like, oh, it's a super cycle, you're bearish, have fun staying poor. Well, we'll see when we get there, but Q1 so far has been the best quarter since 2013, and 2013 ended up being the second best year overall, really because of Q1 and Q4, which again sort of breaks the seasonality. So you can certainly look for patterns here, but like I already said, the biggest one is definitely Q2, Q4. Then I like to look at what is the longest string of positive quarters we've had. We've really never had more than 5 positive quarters, 2016 and all of 2017, that insane bull run. So we're going on the 4th positive quarter this quarter for BTC, which sets my expectations for, okay, if Q2 is bullish, then Q3 is going to be bearish. This should be bearish. We should not be able to exceed 5 bullish quarters. It's really never happened. You can arguably say we've had something maybe in between 2012 and 2013. We had 8 bullish quarters, 7 bullish quarters in a row-ish, But again, I'd throw all this out, say that's not going to happen ever again. And reality is post 2013 we haven't had 5 bullish quarters. And now this doesn't mean we're mega bearish Q3, it just means I'm not expecting Q2, Q4 numbers, right? And if Q1 is bullish, maybe that means Q2 isn't as bullish, but historically it is super bullish. So this doesn't determine every trading decision I have, but it certainly helps shape what's going on. As far as expectations, something else you can look at is the average change per year. And we are certainly on the higher end of that already in Q1. So maybe that tempers your expectations for the entirety of the year as things go on. You know, maybe we land, if we look at the average since 2013 has been a 37% gain on the year, including this quarter. So maybe that changes your expectations a little bit. If we exclude this year, we can say, okay, maybe it's a little lower than that, 28%. You know, so you can think of it like that. If you are unsure, if I'm unsure of what to do here in Q1, Q2, ideally you're accumulating positions through Q1, acknowledging that it's a down quarter and Q3 is the same, and you are dollar cost averaging out of positions in Q2 and Q4, you know, stuff like that, based on historic trends. For ETH, it is definitely different. Historically, Q3, Q4 have been mostly bearish. Really the only thing that stands out with ETH is Q1 and Q2 have been mostly bullish. Even post 2017 has been mostly bullish. Q1, Q2. The other thing with ETH is most of the quarters have been around 0%, 10% or less. You know, it has very, very small quarters here. And then it has those medium quarters between 50 and 70, 80%. And then it has those massive plus 100% quarters. We're currently definitely on the plus 100% quarter. It's never had 5 bullish quarters in a row. So this makes me concerned for Q2. Is Q2 going to be the 6th bullish quarter for ETH? You know, there's less data for ETH, so it's harder to really see a discernible signal other than if it's going to move, it's going to do it in Q1 and Q2. I would not expect big things based on the limited data set for Q3, Q4. So maybe in 5-10 years, all this is going to look silly and it's going to readjust itself, but this is the data we have to work with at this point in time. And if we look at ETH BTC, you get that same picture maybe with a little more clarity, because it's just so clear that Q3, Q4 ETH has not outperformed BTC ever, really. I mean, it did it once in Q3, 2016 and 2020. Other than that, it has not been a better trade than BTC USD. Why that is, I don't know. But that's what the numbers tell you. That's how it breaks down per quarter. Q1 has almost always been positive. And overall, since 2017, it hasn't been that much better of a trade compared to BTC. So again, my expectations are tempered here for Q2 this year. I'm certainly bullish, but I'm not expecting just to be blown away, regardless of EIP 1559 or proof of stake stuff. You know, that may change this certainly, but I'm not mentally there for a bullish Q3, Q4. I'll believe it when I see it. Especially Q4. I mean, these numbers, never has there been a positive Q4 against BTC for ETH. So that certainly sets your expectations for, you know, where that trade is, right? For me, it's not ETH in Q4, and it's definitely BTC. And we can kind of contrast this with XRP, which is almost seemingly completely random. There's kind of been like 4 big quarters, and the rest of it's just kind of middle of the road average. Some really big down quarters here in Q1, just all over the place numbers wise. You know, this looks completely random to me, whereas obviously these numbers look reliable as far as setting your expectations. You know, with XRP, this is just something that's an older chart that I can look to see, is there seasonality with this. You know, there clearly doesn't appear to be seasonality. And if we look at the XRP BTC chart, I'm sure most of it is negative historically, you know, in almost every quarter. So that isn't really going to tell you much based on where to put your money when. If everything's negative, you know, just don't trade this, right? So there's really no trade here that looks good based on seasonality historically. Even still, Q2, Q4 still pop out when Ripple's big quarters did happen. But it's hard to know what to throw out here, what to keep. Yeah, this is just, it's a mess, right? Then probably not seasonality related, but kind of seasonality related. I want to talk about the future stuff real quick. So back in 2016, 2015, we noticed this top bottom sort of cyclical seasonality as far as the futures were concerned on OKEX. So the vertical bars here are lines when the rollovers for the contracts happened. And typically this indicated very close to or the actual top or bottom of these price cycles. So you can certainly see that within a year per quarter when you're looking for bullish, bearish seasonality. The eventual top of 2017 was obviously what was sort of predicted as the top here. If we look again at these dates, it's almost as if they were accumulation, distribution, accumulation, distribution, accumulation, distribution, accumulation, eventual distribution, low volatility, high volatility, low volatility, high volatility. So when you can pick out fairly obvious moves like this, that's certainly going to help your trading lens as well. The main focus now is kind of switch to the CME futures because they are 100% real volume. Although they're cash settled, it's multi-millions of dollars of volume and open interest. So all that's going to affect the spot markets, certainly. And I kind of noticed since the all-time high, that was obviously the top, that was the beginning of BTC CME futures. These dates represent the individual contracts. And I noticed that the biannual contracts sort of set the tone more so than the intra-quarterly contracts as far as the trend is concerned. Obviously, it was punctuated in March, but it still closed higher than the open. So this technically wasn't an up contract from December 30th to June 26th. In December, they added 3 different contracts with different expiry dates, and then they sort of reintroduced the normal cycle. This was because of the halving. But again, if we're focused on the sort of longer time frame expirations, August 3rd to February 26th, for example, that was clearly an up contract. That's expired. Now we're sort of soul searching for what this is going to be here as far as the next long dated contract. But all of these have been up so far. I don't think any of these has actually closed lower than the open, which is very impressive post December 16th. So there's obviously people, watching this sort of thing very intimately. Are there patterns and trends here? Is that pattern or trend changing at all? You can say, all this is just bull trend since March. Okay, but there seems to very clearly be some sort of non-pareidolia related trend here with the expiry contracts. Something else I also talk about with contracts on CME futures is the volatility or shenanigans surrounding these rollover dates. You typically see high volatility, or my expectation going into it, again, if we're talking about seasonality and dates and timing, if I see a big price movement the week before or during a CME rollover, I'm certainly less concerned that it's going to break the entire trend because of open interest on CME, because of hedging, because of expirations. All this stuff is going to slosh the market around completely because a lot of these positions are forced to close and do something else. Either they're closing for good or they're rolling into the next contract or what have you, but they're forced to do something. So that typically means there's a market reaction to that. And it's too early. This is the CME ETH futures. It's too early to map this out yet, but it's certainly something I will be doing going forward. So let me know what you think about seasonality. Is it all just a joke? Are you excited for Q2? It's coming up here. And if you want to check out how I'm trading ETH BTC and USD, you can pop on over to Enzyme. There's a link in the description below. You can see who's deposited and when and what trades I'm making and when for this spot long short fund. Happy trading.